I just wanted to ask you, do you know what the difference is between a baby and a fetus?
It's a great question.
Would you like to
define what fetus means? Or where it comes from, or what the root of that word is?
My guess would probably be a human, basically some human cells that have begun to differentiate into what we would consider a human. It's further past a fertilized egg, but it's not a viable human being or a living human being. It's still attached to the mother's resources.
So this is a really common question that we get on college campuses and online. The word fetus is Latin, and literally all that it means is small person, small human. So when we're talking about a fetus and we're talking about a baby, they are completely synonymous. They mean exactly the same thing.
I don't think that's what she was asking. I think she means biologically.
Biologically, the difference between a child in the womb and a child that's been born?
Mm-hmm. There's no biological difference between a child in the womb, a fetus, and a child after the child has already been born. The only thing that changes is their location, because at conception...
If you disagree, please come to the front.
If you disagree, please come and ask a question.
Okay,
oh,
you're
okay.
welcome to stay too, that's fine.
But that's not a lie, because I actually just put it into Chat GPT. Just put in, what is a fetus? The term fetus refers to the stage of prenatal development that begins at the end of embryonic stage, usually at the 11th week of gestation, continues during birth. During this fetal stage, a developing organism is called a fetus. It undergoes significant growth and development, including the development of major organs and systems, the growth of limbs and facial features, the development of a nervous system. The fetus is sustained by the placenta, which allows for the exchange of nutrients and waste between the fetus and the mother. At birth, the fetus then becomes a newborn baby.
Interestingly, you posed in your question the idea that there were human cells that had not yet developed into a viable human being. So if we're talking about human cells, we are talking about a genetically unique, biologically human being inside or outside of the womb. And it's not just us that say this. I studied biology. I was a biomedical sciences major. But across more than 1,000 academic institutions, 96% of more than 5,500 biologists, most of whom with a PhD, believe that life, human life, begins at fertilization, biologically. And before you think that that's a pro-life lie or myth, 85% of those 5,577 biologists would self-identify as pro-choice. 89% of them would self-identify as liberal, and 95% of them have PhDs. The vast majority of them were also non-religious. So just biologically speaking, we're talking about human cells that are either inside the womb as one location or outside the womb as a different location, grammatically and biologically, both human beings.
So, sorry. Human cells, though, okay, this is kind of a moral question. Do you guys both eat meat?
I do, yes.
You do? Okay.
Yep.
So what is the fundamental biological difference between eating a sentient cow versus aborting a fetus?
Well, that's a good question. Peter Singer, the philosopher in Princeton, who is actually probably one of the most honest pro-abortion philosophers out there, who actually will argue that there really is no fundamental difference between a child in the womb and a child 3 months after birth, and has actually openly argued that a child the parent should be allowed to kill the child 3 months after birth because there is no fundamental difference. Peter Singer talks a lot about this in his Philosophy 101 book, about the nature of humans, and that we as human beings, myself as a Christian, I believe that not only what science tells us that you, at the moment of conception, unique whole living life that's never existed before, will never exist again, with a whole new genetic code that the world has never seen comes into existence. True, but as a Christian, I would tell you, I believe that that life is value. It's my religion, it's my beliefs, it's philosophy that tells us, does that human life have value? And that's what our society does. We have a very species-ish society where we say human beings are at the top of the food chain. We therefore have, it doesn't say that cows don't have value or chickens don't have value, but we believe we have more value. And if you're a Christian, you can answer the question, or a Jewish person, you can answer the question, because you could say, well, we were made in the image of our Creator. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. Do you mind if I just keep asking questions?
Totally.
Let me
Yeah,
know when
this
I
is what
can
this is
stop.
all about.
So first off, I'm not a Christian, nor am I a Jew. I'm pagan. So I am technically religious, but I am not within the Abrahamic
Yeah.
religion. I do not believe that my religion, nor anybody else's, gives me the right to eliminate somebody else's choice to do something else just because I believe it. I believe that the earth is very sacred. I am against certain points of the way that we extract natural resources, but I'm not advocating for those people to be put in jail. I'm simply advocating for it coming back.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure, feel free.
Understanding the earth to be sacred from your point of view and various different species having the same amount of value, what do you believe is the difference in value between the human being cells that you acknowledge exist and the animals or plants or anything else that is a living being on the earth?
Animals are separate from our body and do not have a parasitic relationship with the person that they're inhabiting. So a cow.
Parasitic,
I
wow.
would call it parasitic, yes. They drain
They
resources.
are a parasite.
They
What
drain
would you
resources.
say to know that a baby in the womb is giving
A
antibodies
fetus.
to its mother
It's
to
a
help
fetus.
make the mother more? Baby, fetus, synonymous terms. We've
So
already covered that.
very-
So
I
a
would
baby in the womb helping the mother to become more healthy, exchanging stem cells, giving antibodies. It hardly sounds like a parasite that's sucking things away
So-
from you to me.
Leeches give pain relieving things, so we could just argue that leeches are the exact same as a human fetus. A person who is pregnant is tired, they're exhausted, they're sick all the time. I would not want to force someone to go through that, and childbirth is one of the most traumatic and painful experiences a person can experience. Why would you force someone to go through that by law? And then when they have a miscarriage, what you guys are kind of advocating for is leading to women having miscarriages being imprisoned.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. That is one of the lies that we are going to cover tonight, that miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy treatment is not the same as abortion. So we are going to be breaking those things down. But I'd like to return to this biological
But
argument.
just let me interrupt. So
go for
ChatGPT,
It's Kristan's new favorite toy. She plays on it a lot.
is a parasite a different species? Yes, a parasite is typically a different species than the host. So when you're talking about a parasitic relationship, you're talking about a foreign body, of something foreign that's in your body. When you're talking about a child in the womb, the child in the womb is exactly where he or she is supposed to be. And in fact, the child in the womb tells itself how to develop. It tells the body how to develop the placenta. It's actually not the mother's body that develops the organ that sustains the child's life. It's the child telling the body how to develop an organ to sustain its own life. The child actually, the child actually gives the mother better immunity. This is why I always say women are superheroes, because we can gestate, lactate, and menstruate. The other superhero thing is, like when we're pregnant, we actually have better immunity because our child is actually giving us like extra immunity. So it's not actually a parasitic relationship.
So then why when diseases that will primarily affect immunocompromised individual, why does that typically include pregnant women?
Well, there are. So you're talking about like when women are
Already
pregnant and
immunocompromised.
there's questions about.
No, I'm talking about when there's a specific disease that primarily could kill
Yep.
immunocompromised individuals, such as those with AIDS or elderly. Why does that
Pregnant
typically
women
include
are included in
pregnant
that.
women?
Yeah, pregnant women are susceptible to a lot of things. I couldn't ride roller coasters when I was pregnant too. There were warnings about that. There was warnings about me not drinking my Diet Mountain Dew religiously when I was pregnant as well. There's a lot of things
Drinking
that
alcohol, doing
we
drugs,
generally
etc.
as a society, because even pro-choice Americans would acknowledge that there's something special happening when a woman is pregnant, that she's gestating life. She's helping to sustain another human being. So we treat these humans, these women, with extra care and extra caution. When I was pregnant, it was great. People opened doors for me everywhere I went. People were always offering to help out, carry my bag, and do everything. We always give extra care, and we always take extra care for pregnant women, especially if there's an illness spreading around, because sometimes the pregnant woman, she can't take the same medicine that we can take. Like if I'm not pregnant right now, I can take certain medicine to help me get over the flu or whatever, but if she's pregnant, she may not be able to take that certain medicine because the medicines actually have pharmaceuticals actually have a class, and one of the classes prohibits and says this is not suggested for pregnant women, either because we know it's linked to fetal defects, the child being born with defects in the heart or missing limbs like thalidomide, which was given to women in the early 1900s to stop morning sickness, and we found children were being born without limbs. Or there's other medical drugs, pharmaceuticals, where we haven't tested them on pregnant women yet, and so the doctors just say, out of abundance of caution, don't do those, don't take that medicine.
So I think we kind of went off the rails there, but if you are so concerned about how we treat pregnant women, why are you not advocating as strongly for paid maternal leave, free pre-K?
We are.
Every
Students
day.
for Life is
Every
the
day.
first
Because-
national pro-life group to actually host
Because
lobby days on paid family leave.
From what I've seen, the most of what y'all do has been to eliminate abortion rights and reproductive care.
Well, yeah, let me ask you a question. Are you angry at Harriet Tubman?
No, why would I be?
Because Harriet Tubman was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, a spy for the Union Army, went into the Deep South, freed hundreds of enslaved people, but there's nothing on record about her helping those enslaved people get jobs after she freed them.
I don't think the comparison to a whole living enslaved person is a good comparison to a fetus.
Not comparing to a fetus. I think what we're trying to say is, are you angry at Martin Luther King Jr.? Are you angry at Harriet Tubman? Are you angry at Eleanor Roosevelt because they only worked to advance certain human rights in society and not every human right in society?
No, I'm angry at your hypocrisy.
How are we hypocritical?
But you're not angry at Harriet Tubman's hypocrisy.
I don't think she was a hypocrite. I think people who claim to be pro-life tend to not actually care about the health care of pregnant women and simply want to control them. So
How many pregnancy centers do pro-lifers operate across the country?
why would I care about that information?
Because
Because it's free health care for pregnant
We
women.
operate about 3,000 pregnancy help centers and maternity homes across the country. There are fewer than 600 abortion facilities across the country. That was the website I cited at the beginning of my remarks, standingwithyou.org, that I finance and fundraise for at Students for Life, that any woman, any man across the country can actually go to that website, start an instant chat, put in the zip code if they don't want to talk to anybody, or call somebody and find public and private resources and support to help them during pregnancy and actually beyond pregnancy.
Then why are you trying to defund Planned Parenthood?
Because Planned Parenthood kills babies.
And women, by the way.
11% of what Planned Parenthood does is ending human life, and that's according to the Washington Post.
That is blatantly false.
How is that? The
Please
Washington
prove us
Post.
wrong. How?
Because
How
the
is that a
majority
lie?
of services that they provide actually help pregnant women.
Because they provide services beyond the killing of children.
Here,
therefore killing the children is
I can
not
just pull
true.
up some stats for Planned Parenthood, because this is an interesting one that people often think that, Planned Parenthood's bad, ending human life outweighs, the good outweighs the bad. Planned Parenthood likes to claim that they commit only 3% abortions. The Washington Post has given that 4 Pinocchios and said that's actually 11%. Let me tell you how they get to their math. So when you go into a Planned Parenthood for an abortion, and they will admit this, and the Washington Post uncovered this. The Washington Post is not a pro-life source. When you go into a Planned Parenthood for abortion, you don't just get one. They don't just say like, oh, one service abortion. You're also getting a pap smear. If they care at all, they'll at least give you a precursory breast exam. They don't do mammograms, but at least they'll do a breast exam. And then if they give you hormonal contraceptive, if they give you a 12-month prescription, they actually count that as 12 services. So your one abortion actually ends up being about 16 services. That's how they can get that lower percentage, because they commit 383,000 abortions every year according to their own annual report, but they only see 2.1 million patients. So it's actually, if you look at 2.1, so say, okay, their annual report says they see 2.1, and they're doing 383,000 abortions. Well, I don't have to have a math degree to know that's a hell of a lot more than 3%. because it's about how they measure services. When you open up their annual report on their website, they have a little pie chart, and it tells you their services. So Planned Parenthood raked in $1.7 billion last year. More than 37% came from taxpayers. But a lot of folks say, well, they do good things. But what's interesting is if you start to pull the annual reports on Planned Parenthood, those quote-unquote good things, those services continue to decline. And if you look at 2020, which is the last year of Planned Parenthood's reportable data, they had an increase of abortions by 8.5%. The same year, from 2019's annual report to 2020 Planned report, cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood fell by 30%. Well women tests at Planned Parenthood fell by 39%. STD tests fell by 17.4%, and pregnancy tests fell by 14%. In 20 years, the number of abortions, using their own annual reports, because we don't have a national abortion reporting law, all we have are Planned Parenthood's own annual reports to get this information off of. In 20 years, the number of abortions committed at Planned Parenthood has increased 80%. During that same 20-year period, prenatal services declined by 43%.
Okay, well, I think I've taken up enough of your time. Haven't been convinced, but thanks
Can
for
I
trying.
ask you one more question before you go?
Sure.
A series
free.
of questions, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is a puppy a life worthy of respect and value?
Yes, because it is separate from a human being.
Is a blade of grass something that's life and worthy of our respect and value?
That depends. It probably could be comparable to a fertilized egg, so that's up to you.
Is a fish in the ocean a piece of life worthy of our respect and value?
Same thing as a blade of grass.
How about a single-celled organism on Mars?
How about a human fetus?
That's what I'm asking. Is a single-celled organism on Mars life that's worthy of respect and value?
That's probably a better question to ask yourself than me.
I believe it is. Do you believe it is?
Is it life?
I'm defining it as life, as a living single-celled
It's
organism.
a living cell, but does it have moral weight and value?
Well, that's a great question. See, now we've come back to the beginning of this very long, very important, productive conversation, that there are differences between different types of life, right? They're living beings, they're living organisms, but there are moral differences and moral hierarchies between different types of biological organisms. I would beg to differ that a human being, in or out of the womb, is worthy of our respect and value and protection. And I find it so ironic that so many people will say a single-celled organism on Mars, or a blade of grass, or a fish in the ocean, or a puppy is worthy of our undying respect, support, and protection, but a human being isn't.
Oh, I never said the blade of grass nor the single-celled organism was. I just agreed that it is
What
life.
in your order of priority? So like a cockroach, which I'm saying because I really don't like them, and it triggers me just to say the word.
though, La Cucaracha.
No,
I
stop.
understand. I don't like
So
it
like
either.
a cockroach that's like separate from its mother, not an egg,
Yeah.
and is like wandering around like my house before I freaked out. Okay, I just came from Florida. They're a thing there.
Yes.
So there's a cockroach. That's a separate entity. It's not part of its mother. It's not in the egg, or it's not being gestated. Cockroaches aren't gestated. So is that life more valuable than a human being gestated in the womb, in your mind?
I'd say yes.
Yes, it is.
And it would also depend on the human
So are you a
development.
massive hypocrite then? Like if you're like driving down the interstate and like you're killing bugs and
Or
all
do you
these
kill
like
bugs in your house even?
So bugs aren't sentient, for one, and neither are human fetuses nor a fertilized egg.
But
So-
human
so it's
beings in
sentience
the
for you.
womb are sentient.
Yes.
In
How?
fact, babies in the womb feel emotion just
Yep.
as strongly as their moms do. They can taste different
what
types
point
of
of
food in the
development?
womb.
So-
At every point of development, 3 weeks
That is-
into your pregnancy, your neural tube as a baby is telling you exactly how, through neurotransmitters, not the mother telling the baby's own body telling the baby, how we should direct formation of the head, the eyes, the mouth, the limbs. Their heart begins to beat and pulse almost immediately. By the end of their 8th week, all of their organs have taken shape because of neurotransmitters from their own neural tube directing formation of this child.
That is not sentience.
Babies feel the emotions of their mother with the same intensity throughout the entire pregnancy, and this is a whole new field of research
Ooh,
that is
in
not
fetal
sentience.
development.
ChatGPT.
It needs to be sentient.
The development of the cerebral cortex, which is responsible for conscious thought and perception, begins at 8 to 10 weeks after conception.
So
8 to
first
10
trimester.
weeks.
Sorry?
First trimester of pregnancy. Your baby is having cognitive,
Fetus.
unique, individual
The
thoughts.
fetus has
baby,
thoughts.
same words.
Nope.
By the 21st week of pregnancy, NPR reported this in 2011. So this is even very outdated data.
NPR, that's a big liberal
NPR
source.
reported by the 21st week of pregnancy, babies can taste things in the womb, fetuses can taste things in the womb, like vanilla, carrots, garlic, anise, mint, and that develops their flavor profile for what they like after they've been born. So you asked me at what point during development, are there different points of development that warrant different levels of value? Because before you'd been saying any child in the womb is not as valuable as a child outside of the womb.
Again, I would go off the argument that because it is taking resources away from a person and because keeping pregnancy has consequences for the person carrying it, it does hold some moral weight.
Okay, so what about people with disabilities? What about
about them?
children
What about-
who take resources away from their parents because they have special needs?
That was the parent's choice to have this kid.
No, it wasn't. So my son was born. I didn't know of anything about. I never heard the word cystic fibrosis. And 3 months after he was born, on St. Patrick's Day, I was informed that my son Gunnar has cystic fibrosis, and one of the most expensive diseases that a person can have, a shortened lifespan, takes a considerable amount of time every day to maintain his care. So when I found out that Gunnar had CF at 3 months, should I have been able to kill him?
Are you talking about aborting him?
No,
No,
after
killing
he was
him.
born.
Oh,
She didn't
killing
have the
him?
Infanticide,
diagnosis until he was born.
saying, I'm not going to feed you anymore, I'm going to take you to the woods and leave you off alone, or I'm going to drown you in a bathtub. Because I didn't consent to the life that I now lead with my son.
No, because he is separate from your body and not draining your blood nor your nutrients that you were eating.
Okay, so what about somebody who develops Parkinson's disease or needs a kidney transplant and they need blood transfusions and organs from their loved ones? What about an elderly person who can't walk up the stairs alone and is draining your resources that way?
So if you have an elderly person in the ICU and you're just kind of hanging out there, do you believe the state has a right to take you and say, we need you to connect to this person or we're going to take your organs, and you have no right? And if you are...
No, I'm not
No.
saying the state, I'm saying
Because that's
people
a
who-
fundamentally different relationship than a mother and child. So taking an individual off the street or taking a family member and saying this person is dying of kidney failure, the state is going to force you to be hooked up to a dialysis machine or whatever machine so that person can live. They can't do that because you can. That would be a very nice thing for you to do. And you may consider saying, yes, I will stay hooked up to this machine so grandpa can live, but the state can't force you to do that. But that's denying the fundamental difference between you and a stranger, you and grandpa, versus you and a child. Because a child in the womb is exactly where he or she is supposed to be. Because unless you conceive during a sexual assault, you consented to the actions, knowing the consequence might be the creation of a unique, whole, living human life.
So
I think what's interesting here is we can keep doing the roundabout circular move the benchmark
Yeah, no,
argument a million
that's-
times, right? But ultimately, even remove religion out of it, okay? But this doesn't even need to be a religious argument. In fact, one of the misconceptions we're here to debunk tonight is that all pro-lifers are religious. So forget about that. We're on different pages there. At what point do we acknowledge either a human being has life or a human being doesn't, or has value, or a human being does not have value? Do you think you have value?
to a certain extent, sure.
Where does that extent end?
So this is kind of a philosophical question that I have not really prepared for very much. And I was going to kind of end this out because I don't want to keep talking in circles. So your guys' idea is to remove the right. So I know you all celebrated Roe v. Wade being overturned.
Yeah, I was there. I
You were
announced
there.
it.
So
It gets me applause in some audiences.
So you want the state to be able to force people to give birth?
No, I simply want the state to ensure that people don't get to choose to end the life of a human being simply because they're inconvenient to them.
But
Because
that
that's
results in
murder.
them being forced to give birth.
We simply want the state to uphold their promise that all people should be treated equally under the law. Everyone, regardless of how big you are, where you came from, what your circumstances of life are, what socioeconomic class you're in, what your race is, what your gender is. The government has told us before, and it took a lot of fighting to get there, that we are all equal citizens under the law, except for one thing in America today: the right to life.
Which the Declaration actually says: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that we are all endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights.
But your ultimate goal is to force people to give birth.
My ultimate goal is to have people not kill babies.
But it's not a baby, it's a fetus. And
Okay,
it's a
not kill
parasite.
fetuses.
We
It's a
agree. You can call it a
parasite.
fetus. That's the medical diagnosis.
If you want to
medical
call it
termination
fetus,
part.
fine, but I don't think anyone has the right to choose to end the life of a human fetus simply because they consented to an action and then didn't like the consequences of that action and said, nah, not for me, that's inconvenient. I don't think because in life, being an adult means all of our choices have consequences. And having sex, having heterosexual sex, has an interesting consequence of creating a unique, whole, living human being.
I do just want to commend both of you, by the way, for having this conversation. It's hard to talk about these things, right? In our society, we're told that if we disagree about this, we should just avoid each other like the plague. We're evil and there's no room for common ground whatsoever. I do want to challenge you as you walk away from this conversation to think about that question I asked you that you didn't have an answer to. Do you have value? Because I believe you have value.
We believe you have value.
I believe you have innate value as a human being. I believe you were created in the image of God, which is mind-blowingly incredible to think about from a philosophical perspective. I think that about every person sitting in this room and every person that's currently in the womb or has the opportunity to be in the womb someday.
Yeah, sure. I can definitely challenge some of my philosophical viewpoints. I'm a STEM major, so I don't think about philosophy very much.
I was a STEM major too, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank you for
Thank
being
you for
here,
coming.
genuinely. Thank you. We appreciate the vulnerability. I know it's hard.